Welcome, everybody. We have an amazing guest speaker for you today, Melanie Trecek-King, who will talk about the misinformation trap and changing minds and her journey from creationist to biologist. Melanie Trecek-King is a critical thinking communicator, science educator, and creator of Thinking is Power, a twist on the phrase knowledge is power, which empowers individuals with the skills to make better decisions and protect themselves from misinformation. As an associate professor of biology at Massasoit Community College, she teaches an award-winning general education science course and works with middle and high school educators to integrate these concepts into their curricula. Trecek-King is the education director for the Mental Immunity Project and CIRCE, Cognitive Immunology Research Collaborative, and is a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. We're delighted to have you, Melanie.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm going to talk about, this is really personal for me. I have spent the last 20 years teaching undergraduates biology, and my secret is that I grew up a young Earth creationist. And I now actually specialize in misinformation and critical thinking, and I'm even writing a book about misinformation. So this whole thing is very personal to me. So I have the misinformation trap here because misinformation is it's alluring. It appeals to the parts of us that bypass our critical thinking, our identity needs and our emotions. And it's sticky because once it gets there, it's really difficult to dislodge. I spend a lot of time communicating science online now, and I don't know about you, but I have noticed that misinformation is kind of a problem, and that it is really difficult to talk to somebody who has bought in to misinformation, and that even bringing the facts doesn't necessarily work. All of that is true, but I'm going to tell you about what it's like on the other side of that, and then share the lessons that I've learned along the way. I grew up in a small farming community in rural Western Iowa. My high school graduating class was 39, and that was about a third of my county. It was really hard to find somebody to date because I went to preschool with most of them. We partied on dirt roads. We played flashlight, which is tag at night in cornfields with flashlights. I could not get away with anything because someone would tell my mother. My family owned the diner in town, Trecek Stereodelight, been in the family for 2 generations. Tangent. My mother burned it down the very first day she owned it. It was, in many ways, a really great place to grow up. But like most small towns, so there's a joke in Iowa that small towns usually have the same number of churches and bars. And that's funny because it's true. The church was the center of everything, and not participating in church meant isolation. So my friends and I went to youth groups and to Bible camps. We prayed in schools. We prayed at sporting events. This is outside the high school, still on the church's website. Our little town park still displays the Nativity every Christmas with a message about Jesus. My parents did the best they could. You send your kids to church, right? That's how they become good people. And it's a church, so it can't be that bad. Equally important was politics. And it was just understood that we were Republicans. The point is, all of these were an equal identity. Democrats wanted to raise taxes and take away your guns. And they definitely believed in evolution. We attended a church that believed that the Bible is the literal word of God. God created the everything as it is in 6 days, around 6,000 years ago. I'm sure you've heard variations of these arguments before. I gotta tell you, preparing for a talk like this really sent me into my past and the kinds of things that I used to believe. And even today, it's kind of astonishing to me. Um, for example, we believed that before the flood, there was a canopy of water around the earth that shielded the earth from harmful radiation. And it led to a perfect world. Like the climate was perfect. There didn't need to be rain because everything there were no predation. All animals were herbivores. People could live to be hundreds of years old. So when you go back to the Old Testament and it would say all these men lived to be hundreds of years old, it's because of this. And that was also the water for Noah's flood. And so Noah's flood was about 4,000 years ago, and it was sent to punish the wicked. Animals lined up two by two, and all of humanity was destroyed except for Noah and his family. Noah's flood explained the fossil record, like the layers of fossils. It also explained geological formations, like the Grand Canyon. And we had lots of evidence that debunked evolution. So, for example, there was no transitional fossils. Irreducible complexity, this is like something like the eye, the vertebrate eye, or the flagellum in the sperm are too complex to have evolved bit by bit. Um, Radiometric dating was wrong, and actually the canopy of water around the Earth was part of the reason that it couldn't be trusted. It violated the second law of thermodynamics in particular, because evolution is an increase in complexity, whereas thermodynamics is an increase in entropy. Um, there's microevolution like antibiotic resistance, but not macroevolution. And of course, frauds like Piltdown Man and various other frauds. There's more evidence. I'm gonna get to that in a second. But this is the kind of evidence that we were taught that atheist scientists claimed that proved evolution. But we knew better, right? Evolution was from the devil. So we denied evolution, and creation science helped to explain what we knew was the truth, which is that God was behind everything, as it says in the Bible. There's more. Like life is too perfect to have been random. It's never been observed. Like nobody was there to see it. It requires more faith to believe than creation. And why are there still monkeys? Oh, it's just a theory. Some of these at this point, I gotta tell you, they kind of trigger me because I've been through them like a million times and I still try to address them. It's a conspiracy. We're gonna come back to that in a second here because misinformation tends to, at its core, get to it's a conspiracy. Now, in this case, it was scientists were conspiring to, usually working with the devil, to lead people astray. Some of these arguments are actually quite complicated, and if you try to debunk them, then it might take a bit of understanding of what's wrong and what the real science is to be able to address it. The point is we were trusting certain people because they were part of our tribe. So let's back up here and look at how I got here, and let's also try to understand. Let me just say, I have empathy for people who fall for misinformation because I did. I personally, when we form beliefs, we're not a blank slate. We have built-in biases and emotions, and we have pattern detection, and all of these lead us to jump to conclusions. And we fill those, we map on to those basic infrastructure, what we experience from the outside, or what we hear from people around us. As a science educator or communicating on science online, I often run into versions of I know ghosts are real because I saw one. Or I know aliens are real because I saw one. Or I know homeopathy works because I tried it and I felt better. And then the received wisdom is from our culture, our parents, our authorities, like teachers. Uh, do you know the cargo cults in the Pacific Islands? So, my husband and I like to travel, and a few years ago we ended up in Vanuatu. I'm going to be honest, I did not know that was a place until right before we got there. It was all new to me. And it's this isolated archipelago of islands in the middle of the South Pacific. So during World War II, the United States government was fighting Japan, and so we would island hop across the Pacific. We would get to an island, we'd bring in munitions, we'd establish, build runways, bring the supplies, and then hop to the next one. And we did this in Vanuatu. Now, Vanuatu had been isolated for a very long time. People had not seen blue jeans, let alone airplanes, right? And then came American GIs with like spam and electricity. And they developed a religion around this called the John From cargo cult. So John From is probably John from America. And I'm in Vanuatu and I'm seeing John From and like makeshift runways. So every year on February 15th, um, they have John From Day, where the men put on blue jeans, they paint USA in red, white, and blue on their chest. They carry like guns made of bamboo. They sing American patriotic songs, and they worship John From. They want John From to come back and bring them more of these goods. And I was fascinated by this, and I kind of held head tilt kind of way, like, really? They believe that? And then I was reading an article in Smithsonian, and they interviewed one of the priests and said, well, it's been like 90 years, and you're still waiting for John From to come back. And he said, well, you've been waiting for 2,000 years, and you're still waiting for Jesus to come back. It's hard to argue with that. But then it really got me thinking, what else do I believe that's simply a result of stuff seeping into my brain via osmosis? It just gets there, and you don't think about it. You just kind of take it as a truism. Because all of this swims in a sea of trust. We trust ourselves, our experiences. We trust people around us. And those beliefs get in there, and then we get really, really, really confident that we're right. Actually, this feeling of certainty really is a feeling. It's not necessarily based on evidence. But overconfidence is one of the biggest barriers to learning. You can't change your mind. You can't grow with new evidence if you're convinced that you're right. So we form beliefs in this mix of we've got some built-in infrastructure, and then we have these outside things, and then we get really sure we're right. As a science educator, for a long time, we have operated under the information deficit model, which is people don't understand evolution. Name it. So we need to give them more information. Why won't they accept this? They don't have the facts, so I'm going to give them more. The problem with that is our beliefs are more like a web. So if you imagine all of your beliefs in a series of interconnected nodes, and as you go to the inside, they get more and more foundational to the core of who we are. But they're all connected, right? Even if you're out here, it's somehow connected to what's down here. So this web of beliefs, when we're faced with new information, it's not like you just fill in something that's not there. You're interpreting it through your web. We don't like webs that are inconsistent, meaning it's more comfortable to have incorrect beliefs but maintain a consistent worldview than it is to have to face the fact that the possibility that your whole web is wrong. If I want, for example, if I've got a singular belief, let's say I have a student that doesn't accept evolution, and I've got this node, and I'm trying to pull at this node. Well, here, this right here is wrong. If I pull that out without replacing it with something that helps them maintain a consistent web, then it's not going to be sustainable. It's going to fill right in, and they're going to revert to something that's consistent. So we make sense of new information within this, this web of our beliefs. And our reasoning, so Jonathan Haidt has this metaphor, the elephant and the rider, that helps us understand. It's a simplified version for sure, but I think it's really helpful. So if you imagine in your brain you have an elephant, and then you have a rider on top of the elephant. So the rider is the part of your brain that you think is you, right? It's the part that's capable of critical thinking. But it sits on top of an elephant, and that elephant is really hard to control. Elephants are big, they're powerful. Our elephant is always on. It's the part that's using our biases, our emotions, our desires, our trust, our tribal allegiances. And it's just operating in the background, always on. Now, our rider is on top of that elephant. And the rider could, so new information comes in, we have to think through something. Is that true? I don't know. Let me think through it. All of that's a lot of work. It is hard to turn on critical. It is hard to control an elephant. So most of the time, the rider just goes, yeah, that sounds about right. And then if asked, why do you think this, right? Why do you think your elephant is right? Basically, your elephant or your rider will come up with all of these reasons. And actually, the smarter we are, or the more educated we are, the better our writers can get at justifying what our elephant already wanted to believe. I love, actually, I mentioned this earlier too, Rhett and Margaret and so on. My kryptonite is peanut butter ice cream. I can eat an obscene amount of peanut butter ice cream. So if I'm faced with peanut butter ice cream, my elephant is like, eat the ice cream. Now, my writer knows it's probably not the best idea to gorge on peanut butter ice cream. But my elephant really wants it. So what does my writer do? Well, you were good today. You had a salad for lunch. You worked out. You won't eat peanut butter ice cream tomorrow. It finds the excuses that I need to justify what my elephant wanted to do anyway. So often our thinking is just underlying under the surface. It's emotional and unconscious. Our elephant makes suggestions. The writer goes, yes, that's right, and then figures out how to justify what the elephant's conclusion was anyway. And then we have misinformation. So information impacts our beliefs, and our beliefs impact our decision making. So it's important to use good information. Misinformation is, broadly speaking, information that's false or misleading in some way. It's a spectrum of how true it is, and certainly of intent as well. Disinformation is purposefully deceitful. So disinformation is a type of misinformation that's intended as a lie, essentially. I don't like to use that word generally because unless we know somebody is purposefully lying, they could just be wrong. But if we know somebody's lying, then it is important to call it out. So misinformation then is false or misleading, but why would we fall for it? Well, it's because of our web of beliefs, our identity, and our desires. It's our elephant. Our elephant is defending our web of beliefs. It's accepting information that aligns with how we already see the world, with our what we want to be true. Hope and desires, those are really powerful. It's also, we trust the people around us. Like, back to me, I grew up in a community of everyone around me was a young earth creationist. Not accepting these beliefs meant not having a community. And one of the ways that we signal our membership in communities isn't just by accepting the beliefs, but is by being a good team member. I'm going to wear the shirt and the cross and the whole thing. The problem is, of course, that it's nearly impossible that all of our beliefs are true. So we need to make sure that we're not using false beliefs to fall for false beliefs, and that we're not, our elephant isn't leading us astray. Now, there's a variety of types of misinformation, but for our purposes, I wanted to focus on science misinformation. And there's, generally speaking, two types of science-based misinformation. There is pseudoscience and science denial. And pseudoscience is pretending to be scientific. It puts on the trappings of science, but it's not following the kinds of methodology that makes science reliable. Pseudoscience is motivated by a desire to believe something. And because we want to believe something, our standard of evidence is low. Things like homeopathy, a lot of alternative medicine is a great example, astrology, ghosts. Science denial is the refusal to accept well-established science. Things like evolution denial, climate change denial, vaccine denial. These are motivated by not wanting to accept the conclusions. And so we set our standard of evidence very low. Now, the motivations in this case are often identity, but even things like solution aversion, which is not liking the perceived solutions to a science-based problem. Climate change, for example, climate change denial, the early denial in particular, was motivated by anti-government regulation. It was coming out of the Cold War, fighting communism. These scientists in particular, to them, government was bad, which meant any problem that required government wasn't real. And so what they did was they sowed doubt. The purpose of a science denial campaigns, especially the industry-funded ones, their goal is not necessarily to convince us of one thing or another. It's just to throw out enough confusion that it sows doubt, so people go, I don't know, we certainly don't know enough to accept it or to act. Definitely not enough to regulate. Now, importantly, there is a difference between industry-funded denial and its victims. But pseudoscience and science denial are like two sides of the same coin. They often feed on each other. Let me give you an example here. This is from the Journal of Creation, which is a creationist journal. Creationism is motivated by, is this cart, horse? I'm not sure where this goes, chicken, egg. I know for me, I wanted to deny evolution because evolution meant God was not real. I needed an alternative explanation to replace the well-supported scientific one, and so filled that with creationism. So evolution, standard of evidence is high, pseudoscience is low, and then you get something like this, which if you don't know the science, and if you have the kinds of tribal allegiances, identities, motivations to believe in something like this, it is easy to understand how one could fall for this and then feel very confident that they're right. Look at all of this evidence. This is from it's no longer there, but it was an Atlanta area high school biology textbook. And I wanted to show you what this looks like. Here we've got evolution and creationism, and see how they've represented evolution, Satan. Creation is God, Christ. All of the good things, all of the bad things. This obviously is not true because it means Satan is winning. Creation is obviously true because this means God. So these two are feeding on each other. Where we deny something, we replace it with pseudoscience and vice versa. And if you dig enough into most forms of misinformation, and science is certainly no exception, you get to conspiracies. Because there's really no other way to explain why the vast majority of the world scientists disagree with you. They're conspiring. Here is an example of a quote. We've got evolution has primarily been an attack on religion by militant atheists who wrap themselves in the mantle of science in an effort to refute all religious claims concerning a creator, an effort that is also often attempted to suppress scientific criticisms of Darwin's work. All of it wrapped up in one. We have the motivations for denying evolution and for accepting creationism. And then also we have the get down to the conspiracy theory. I want to take a little break here and I want to give you a quiz. Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 questions. They're multiple choice questions. So I think Rhett is going to put the questions into the chat and put your answers under them. Before I start, do you accept evolution? Yay, nay, yes? Okay, great. Do you think you understand it? Yeah? Okay. First question. Oh, I should also say, this is the kinds of questions I would give my non-major students. Okay? I think the questions live on in the chat, right, Rhett? So if you miss it, they're still in the chat. All right, question 1. Question 2. You didn't know I was going to quiz you on this Sunday night, did you? I'm an educator. Can't help it. Question 3. Question 4. How are we doing, Rhett?
Good. I think a few people answered before I pasted, but most of them are in there.
Okay. So let's start at the first question. What do we think the general answer of this one is? And by the way, this is a multiple choice question, and you're not going to fail, right? Like, what's the worst that could happen? So put something in there, guess.
I got a couple C's and a couple A's, Melanie.
Okay. No B's or D's.
I don't think so, unless it was a late entry. And I don't know this answer.
So B, Pteridophyta is ferns. C, haplodiploidy is the sex determination system in a lot of ants, bees, and wasps, where the females develop from fertilized eggs and males from unfertilized eggs. Anisogamy is the sexual reproduction system with the 2 differently sized gametes, which is basically what all plants and animals use. This one answer is eukaryotes. And eukaryotes actually explains, so this theory is that an ancestral cell engulfed free-living smaller cells that then started to function within that cell. So there's the mitochondria and the chloroplasts, and these are there's really wonderful evidence for this. They both have their own DNA that's a single circular chromosome like bacteria. They reproduce via binary fission, which is what bacteria do. The internal membranes are similar. So lots of great evidence for this. But this would be the explanation, the endosymbiotic theory explains eukaryotes. All right, this one, type of selection that's most likely to result in speciation. What do we have?
I'll put that back in the chat if anybody wants to answer below. But a few people did get that one right, Melanie. I looked back and I saw a few people got the A right on the first question.
You know, I led with a difficult one, so good for you. That's amazing. Okay, this one, do we have certain...
We got a lot of B's coming up. Let me look at the question that I put in the first time, see if there's any other different answers. We got a lot of B's for this one. That was my guess as well. The word makes sense, but is it a trick question?
No, well, I wouldn't do that. I totally would. So if you imagine traits on a bell curve, there's selection for the average, there's selection for an extreme, and there's selection for both extremes. And when you have for both extremes, it tends to diverge the population into two. So great. All right. In which state would you expect to find the most endemic species?
I'm getting a lot of C's, Melanie, because of the isolation. That was my
Oh,
guess. That was my guess too.
well, actually, bonus question. So endemic, for those of you who might not know, endemic means they only live there. And it's because Hawaii is very isolated, and isolation is the primary driver of evolution. Do you want to guess the rate of endemism for species in Hawaii? It's over 90%, meaning over 90% of the terrestrial species in Hawaii only live in Hawaii. But for insects, it's about 95%. Okay. Which of the following is a post-zygotic reproductive isolating mechanism? Um, while the answers are coming up here, I do have to say, as a biology educator, biology is all about sex, and it certainly makes the subject easier to teach. The birds and the bees are fascinating. What do we think? What do we have it?
Got almost a split between A's and D's, but maybe more A's, maybe more on the A side.
Okay. Well, it's actually hybrid sterility.
Ooh.
So the reproductive isolating mechanisms are the barriers between species, and the more closely related a species is, the more likely. Let me back up. Prezygotic means it separates. The mechanism prevents fertilization, and postzygotic means the egg is fertilized, but the hybrid is either sterile or inviable. Closely related species tend to be isolated by the post-zygotic barriers, but it's also not selected for, right? I mean, none of these are selected for, but if an organism goes through the process of reproduction and then the hybrid offspring is not viable or sterile, then they've invested a lot of time and energy into something that's not been in their benefit. But this would be like the horse and donkey, or they make a mule. So the mule, though, is sterile. That's why we consider them separate species. All right, so how did you do? So out of 4 questions, did you get 100, 75, 50, 25? You
I
don't
don't
have
think
to.
anybody got them all right. There were some smart people, but I don't think anybody got them all right. But one
Again, this is,
person said 50%, no, 25%, 50%.
look, I'm a nerd. I love these kinds of questions. But I get most people have other things to do than study evolution. This, again, would be the kinds of quiz that I would give my non-major student. My point here, actually, is that I see a lot of people online who say this kind of thing. But actually, I hold that a lot of people who accept evolution don't understand it either. They're accepting it for the reasons that I talked about earlier. They're putting their trust, in this case, in the process that led to reliable information. It comes down to trust. And that's okay. None of us can know everything. Back to me. Before I tell you how I changed my mind, there's something else that's important. And that is, I was also taught that God made man in his image and made woman out of him to serve him. And that when she sinned and tempted him, she was the cause of everything bad in the world, and then needed to spend all of eternity atoning for those sins and definitely serving men. And in high school, so things were bad. In high school, my mom's adult Bible school teacher got sick, and she offered to step in and substitute And they took it before the church board. Now, keep in mind, like my entire town was 1,400 people. This was not a big place. Everybody knows each other. They took it before the church board, and over the next couple of months, women were relegated to cooking, cleaning, daycare. There was a woman master of Sunday schools. They went to her house to tell her husband she could not do that job anymore. I say job, she was a volunteer. My mom is a very strong woman, and I was really confused. She's also very colorful. She would say, Melanie, you can do anything anybody with a penis can do, except for pee standing up. She's wrong, by the way. Don't ask how I know. But I was like, Mom, I don't understand. You're telling me this, and then I'm going to church, and they're telling me that my place is to serve men. And I apparently asked a lot of questions because then the youth minister eventually came to my house to tell me what my place was. So I went to college to study biology and chemistry. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I changed my mind and decided I wanted to start prairies on fire because it's way more fun. And but it was not biology that changed my mind, actually. I know memory is flawed, but here's what I remember. I was in World Civ 1. I was a sophomore, I think, studying. The professor was lecturing over the ancient river civilizations, and she was explaining how each of the civilizations had gods that mirrored their environmental conditions. So those that had stable conditions had peaceful gods, and those that had lots of disasters, natural disasters, had wrathful gods. And like right now I can feel myself. I was grabbing the top of the desk and I felt like a mushroom cloud went over my head. Like, holy shit. You mean men make gods? Wow, did that make sense? Because look, if I was a dude, I'd probably do the same thing. But it had never occurred to me that men made it God. You know what I mean? Men made God. This was like instantaneous for me. I was primed, though. My religion had taught me that I was less of a person because of who I was. And that didn't seem right to me. I was prepared for all of the evolution arguments. I was armed with the straw versions that any of those evolution scientists would throw my way, and I could defend them. But this one hit really close to home. And when I realized it, I started to question everything. I went through a bit of an angry atheist phase. This was like early 2000s. So it was pre-internet. I'm really glad for that, by the way. But I couldn't necessarily find a community as easily as today. But I still remember at the time thinking I needed to find a secular community because secularists can't be sexist. They don't believe in God. Why would they be sexist? And then, well, gods are a reflection of us, after all. The point is, it's not about facts. Creationists don't deny evolution because they don't have the facts. It's because what it implies. It means the Bible is wrong. It means there is no God. It means they have no purpose. It means they are wrong. Their tribe is wrong. They fully believe that evolution is incompatible with religion. Evolution and God are not the same thing. We could have philosophical arguments about God and so on, but there's no place for God in science. And there are a lot of people who accept both evolution and religion, and I should say God. But to me, and to a lot of people in this place, it means the same thing. And it is too much. It's too much to lose, right? That pain of being wrong, of losing your community. And I could definitely tell you what wouldn't have changed my mind, and that is mocking. Honestly, I don't know of anyone who's ever changed their mind. Please tell me I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. But calling people stupid does not work. I know for me, I expected mockery. I was taught that that's what they do. They were awful people and they would mock. So it actually made us circle the wagons. So when we're talking to others, let's go back to the rider and the elephant, because we all have a rider and an elephant. We think if we're talking to somebody who has a false belief, or maybe they've fallen for misinformation, that if I address the facts, if I convince them on the facts, it will work. But remember, those facts are hitting that wall of the web of beliefs, and they are motivated by their elephant. They're protecting themselves. Their beliefs, they think, are the same as them. So they're protecting those core beliefs and who they think. I guess I would say, if you're having a conversation with somebody else, remember that it's an elephant conversation. And it's not just you're talking to their elephant. We all have elephants. So on the surface, we seem to be talking about these facts, but it's not. It's about something much deeper. So if I could go back to my past self, for example, I wouldn't address evolution or creationism, because that's not what it was about. It was about my identity. It was about who I trusted. It was about my need to believe that there was a God. And so I would actually dig a bit more and try to find the roots of those and engage her in a mutual, well, let's investigate this together. Let's work on this together. How would we figure this out? How do we know what's true? So it's not a lecture. It's not a one-way me telling you that, well, me telling me that I was wrong. And also, I would just add, if you can, don't call out, but call in. So instead of openly, like, so for example, if you see somebody in your life sharing something that's false on social media, if you put something in the comments, oh, that's false, and especially if you go in, oh, that's stupid, that's not going to work. They're probably going to dig in. Private message them. Engage in a closed conversation where you can have that kind of one-on-one elephant conversation and work together to find a truth. I told you this was personal. So the key take-homes here, what I would say is, misinformation appeals to our elephant. That's why we fall for it. The best defense is to be aware of ourselves and to be part of a community that is trying to collaboratively find the truth, and that allows people the space to change their minds. I very much appreciate your time. My website is on here. I love social media followers who aren't going to troll me. So if that's you, please follow me on social media. And next summer, I will have written a book.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I can't remember, Melanie, if I shared this with you or not, but Melanie and I are kindred spirits of sorts. I too was a young earth creationist. I was an early atheist, a born-again Christian in college, went to seminary degree, graduate, and then later became an agnostic atheist humanist. I got pulled into your testimony, Melanie, was paralleled mine a lot. Not the small town part, but just the desire for being rational. And then once I learned about some of these creationist groups like Institute for Creation Research, later Ken Ham started one called Answers in Genesis. They had this air or had this facade of pseudoscience, which was appealing to me as an engineering student. I felt like I wanted to rationalize my faith because as a young atheist, there were certain questions that I felt atheism could answer that Christianity did. I kind of capitalized on that, fell into that trap. They had the whole community thing going on. And so then I was like, oh, this is really cool. I didn't realize that I was wrong all these years, but I still had the rational part of me that wanted to rationalize that. And then I fell into the trap of misinformation with the whole, apologetics and young earth creationists. And that lasted 9 years. Luckily, I finally got out of it.
Great.
So how long were you a Christian? Or remind us again real quick.
Yeah,
before
I
you?
graduated, I think I was 20. So in college, yeah, I was an undergrad.
Okay.
I was solidly into halfway through biology and chemistry degrees. But again, it was world civ.
Yeah, so first, it's really great talk. It was really interesting kind of hearing your perspective, especially as an educator. That kind of got me thinking about some of these questions because I also am trying to get into education. So I'm currently a postdoc working at UCSD and obviously want to be a professor where I will be, dealing with these different students about these scientific topics. And I guess my first question, my main question was if you run into like, I guess specifically from the student teacher dynamic, someone where they are coming to you and have this web, kind of using your model where, uh, I'm sorry, I wrote it down just to go back and read this. So how do you basically modify belief from the perspective of your web-based model rather than a deficit-based one when the conclusions are something that is kind of more urgent and does need correcting? So you were talking a lot about calling people in, kind of helping them navigate these spaces that they might have not had opportunity to before. That's kind of like a long game. So right now, if you have people whose web is leading them to do active harm now, kind of how do you balance those approaches with the urgency of like a lot of these situations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, for me, one of the most important things that I like to start with is
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear a word he said.
yeah, and Rep, maybe you can help me on this. The gist of what I got was, how do you help somebody who is fully in on, or maybe new to thinking about these issues, but has a web that's based on a God belief? Did I get that right?
Yeah, yeah, sounds like, yeah, exactly. He wanted, well, Christopher, yeah, it was a little choppy, but I think you're right, Melanie. It was like, give us some more strategies how to talk to people. But I thought he did mention too about if there was an immediate danger, what can you do? There might be some need to be something more than the long haul strategy to fight something that's maybe somebody's at risk or dangerous. Christopher, did that come through okay?
Yeah, so I just like to give a concrete example, like maybe if there's someone who is really distrustful of like scientific institutions, so they do crystal healing instead of trying to do chemotherapy. Like, how do you deal with that urgency? Thinking of the web-based model.
Yeah. So that's a really hard thing. Uh, so if you're talking to somebody about who's fallen for misinformation, first of all, I'm assuming this is somebody that you have a connection with, that you can have one-on-one conversations with. Having conversations like this on social media, especially with people that you don't know, is very difficult. But if you have a personal connection, um, definitely leaning into like the. Let me back up for a second. One of the most important questions, one of the most important first steps for thinking critically, especially around scientific issues, is an empirical question. Like, is this something that is falsifiable or is it not? Is this is it a value? Is it an opinion? Is it a supernatural something? Or is it actually an empirical question? Because oftentimes, like the even the kinds of fact-based things. So my belief was about God. And I had like a fact shield around it. But if you drill down at the core of it, the center of my web was an unfalsifiable deity. And so just getting people to recognize the difference between something that is evidence-based and something that isn't evidence-based. Most God beliefs are not harmful. What you're talking about, broadly speaking, what you're talking about with something like chemotherapy actually is really harmful. Um, Falling for false cancer beliefs. That is almost certainly going to rest on trust. There is a trust issue. Somebody is trusting certain sources, and the question is why. Um, Hope is really powerful. Like if if we really want something to be true, if we have the false, I'm thinking about something like a false cancer treatment. If my situation is really dire and this false treatment offers me hope, it might not work for me, but it's giving me that false promise, so I'm more likely to fall for it. And that tends to, the opposite side of that is denying treatments that might actually benefit. This is all to say, what I would do is really drill down to who they're trusting, what their motivations are, why they're trusting certain sources, and try to connect with them at that level.
Good answer. Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, and sometimes I try to remind people that, God gives us intelligence to do things, to discover, even if it's from the Christian framework itself, you can say, God gave us the intelligence to discover his creation, and some scientists have been motivated by that to explore his creation and come up with scientific facts and information. Then there's a part that is not necessarily incompatible. So you can say, hey, yeah, he gave us the intelligence to create actual medicine, and it's proven, and it's so going that route can sometimes help.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a youngest creationist. I'm interested in hearing what people on the other side think. So I think the main question I have is that it sounds like you're talking about how youngest creationists have their own tribe and they don't like people or ideas that go against that tribe, and everyone has that elephant that's driving them, and you want to have a consistent worldview and things that make you accepted. But how do you know that that isn't similarly true for you? I'm sure like you have your biologist friends who would reject you if you believed in younger creationism, and I'm sure that you like having ideas, you like feeling like you escaped the matrix and now understand the world correctly and the other people don't. So I could turn the question back on you and say, how do you know that you don't have a community that supports you and your beliefs and you aren't really accepting truth, just what's convenient?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Ethan. So what I would say is there's not all communities are the same in that some communities are rallied around beliefs, protecting important beliefs, and some are, and there's a spectrum of communities, right? But on the extremes, on the extreme would be something like a community that is organized around trying to understand reality. I would say a community of inquiry, maybe. So, a community of inquiry is one in which ideas are tested. They have to stand up to scrutiny. They're only accepted given the evidence. And so, something like evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory is the most unifying and supported theory in all of the life sciences. It's been under scrutiny for 150 some years and continues to be. Every new study continually tests it. The one thing I would say is, so there's a difference between beliefs that can be tested and those that can't. So a God claim is not inherently testable. Like we can't ever really know what God is, if there is a God, how many gods, male or female God, whatever it is. Those kinds of things are the realm of religion. Any claims around empirical claims are those that are subject to scrutiny and part of the scientific method. So let me give you an example. I used to believe, as the Bible says, that there was a global flood about 4,000 years ago, and that so that claim, the claim that there was a global flood 4,000 years ago, is an empirical claim. It is testable. If it were true, we would expect to find evidence around the world. We don't find that. But even if we did, we could not test for God as the cause. Right? Are you with me on the difference? So what I would maybe ask you to start thinking about is the different kinds of claims what is testable versus what isn't testable. And if it is testable, to do our best to scrutinize it. We can't ever prove anything true, but the longer it withstands that scrutiny, the more likely it is to be true. But actually, one of the other things, so I'm talking to past self for me again. One of the difficult things is when we set up these belief systems, a belief system, any belief system, around claims that are empirical. And if those empirical claims are wrong, then the entire foundation of it crumbles. So what I try to do with my students now, as a scientist, there is no, science has no say about the existence of a God. It cannot test for a God. If we base our beliefs about empirical reality on the existence of a God, and if those empirical claims turn out to be wrong, that means there is no God. That's where we start to get into trouble. That's where I was. I didn't want to accept science because that meant that that underlying belief is wrong. And so what I would ask you to consider is maybe there is a place to maintain some sort of religious belief in a supernatural being without having to have the empirical claims align with that exactly. I don't know if I said that very well. I will tell you that I got up at 4 o'clock this morning, my time, and it is late.
No worries, Melanie. Yeah, I mean, for me, and just to be true to all spectrums of belief, there are a good number of creation, evolution, creation evolutionists that they do believe in God and evolution, and there's a way they harmonize the two. There's, some people think they're completely incompatible, some people think they're very compatible, and then there's every spectrum. And I was not in a tribe when I was an early atheist, and I wasn't really in a tribe when I started getting into Christianity. Of course, I was in that tribe, but I felt like that there wasn't as big of a motivation for the atheists to say that the earth was old. I mean, it was so unlikely that that large number of people would have some conspiracy against God, because it really didn't disprove God. It just said that maybe there are some questions about how we interpret the Bible. And we have a conservative Christian that Jeremy and I frequents our discussion groups, and he's a biologist, and he fully believes in evolution. But he's also a Christian, so that there is compatibility in that way. So yeah, it's a big question, and Ethan, I do applaud you for your bravery in coming to this meeting and just being bold enough to answer that question. And Melanie, I don't know if you have any books on hand. I mean, there's a ton of books on these topics. If you have any favorites that address, obviously not a biology book, that would be too deep even for me, but something that kind of addresses creationism and evolution from more of a layperson. If you have any titles that you can share now or later, that could be helpful for people to find out.
Yeah, and actually, Ethan, if you want to contact me, I can, because was it Francis Collins was the head of the NIH, who is a creationist as well, evolutionist and creationist. I could be getting this wrong, and he does have a book out. He's passed now, but the book must be like 20 years old now. But it's a great it's a great book from somebody who is religious but actually does accept the science.
We do have a couple more hands up. I'm going to go to the next one. Let's see. Go ahead with your question.
So appreciate the talk and appreciate the thoughtful questions and answers. My question is that, well, first give context. Um, when I'm talking with people who have different religious beliefs, it's usually Christianity, because I'm here in the United States. I'm from the Midwest. I'm finding that their religion is generally a vehicle for something else. And what I often find is usually whiteness, like white supremacy, or like patriarchy. And usually, I mean, patriarchy and white supremacy go hand in hand, I've found. And so my question is, how would you suggest trying to talk with someone about the vehicle they're using, or rather, should we talk about the religion that they're using, or talk about really the white supremacy that it's being expressed and is motivating, seems to be the motivator, like which, or try to do it at the same time, but I found that doing them at the same time, like one seems to obfuscate or cover for the other, so you can't really get at either one if you try to get at one at a time. So what do you do? Or is it just like they know what they're doing? It's a waste of time to try to talk with them or enlighten or change anything about their thinking or behavior. Like, yeah, what do you think? Thank you.
Amazing question. And you can see based on my presentation that I understand where you're coming from because um, my religion was being used as a cover for, was motivated by, it's hard, again, chicken or egg thing. For sexism. And I should add, so I'm from Western Iowa. I don't know if you know who Steve King is, not the author, the Republican congressman who is, so he was a longtime congressman from my district in Western Iowa and was eventually censured by House Republicans for being too racist. And I almost showed one of his tweets about comparing Juneteenth to aborted babies. And my husband is a Black man, and there were definitely times in that area it was very uncomfortable. I would say, first of all, that it is nobody's responsibility to fight those battles if you don't want to fight them. Um, that said, if you do want to take them on, all of these beliefs that the God belief, the morals, values, all of those are unfalsifiable. And those tend to be at our core. And they tend to motivate other things. And for a lot of people, they tend to come together. And so it is hard to know which one to address. And I think it would depend on the context and who the person is. But what I find fascinating is, so like, if you imagine big picture stuff, in the last 500 years, where science has come, let's do the last 100 years. What we've learned about the world, what we've been able to do. Like, I mean, I'm talking to you all over the world on a device that's, ironically propped up on my hotel Bibles. So, but that book has been unchanged in that whole time, right? The morality that we're still using, that the lessons that we're learning from it, they can be altered based on who's interpreting it. But science is limited to the physical world. We can test those ideas and we can learn and we can build on them over time. We can continue to argue over unfalsifiable beliefs for forever because there's no way to actually test them. And on the surface, it looks like we're talking about facts, but it's not if you drill down as to these other issues. One other thing, because I'm not answering your question, because it's a very difficult one, so I apologize. I wish I could solve all the world's problems. I still hold that the vast majority of people are good people, and they may believe things that are not true. I know I do. I wish I did. I knew what I was wrong about. People care about their families. They care about their communities. They care about other people. They're misled, maybe in various ways, as we all are. But I like to, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, drill down as much as possible to what we have in common, because it's probably more than we think. And once we can build there, we can start to address these things that are important to us. And so, and obviously, always the price of these conversations is being open yourself. But get down to the elephant as much as possible. And know also, Gideon, I think I said your name wrong. Please know that it's not your battle to fight if you don't want to fight it.
Well said, Melanie. Thank you. Emily, you're up next.
All right, so this is actually Don. I'm using my wife's account. So I
Oh,
apologize
okay.
for the
I was going to say, you say you have a
confusion
very
there.
masculine voice, Emily.
So I'm kind of a newcomer to like the belief in evolution. I grew up as a creationist, and I deconstructed from my faith when I was about 30, about 31. So it's been about 3 years. And I've tried to, the past few years, understand evolution to the best that I can. I didn't really get a good education in biology, which makes it difficult, to kind of know where to start. So I've started with some things that some friends of mine have, helped, like, given to me, like the Jerry Coyne book, How or Why Evolution is True. I guess the question that I have is, I have like these things that I've been convinced of, like endogenous retroviruses for me is like kind of the nail in the coffin, or like kind of the ultimate proof for me that helps me to like be confident that like we are related to chimpanzees. But I guess what I'm wondering is like, is it okay with like such a limited amount of knowledge to be very confident? Because one thing I struggle with when I talk to people who still are creationists is like, I don't have all the answers. I'll never have all the answers, but I have very few answers. And so sometimes I leave conversations feeling like, man, maybe I am not justified in like being as confident as I am. So yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to that.
This is when you're talking to other creationists?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Can I ask why is evolution important in this conversation?
Well, I guess for me it's important because it's true. It wasn't necessarily for me what like caused me to lose my faith, but when I'm talking with, well, you know what? I guess I think I do feel like, because I came from a very fundamentalist faith, I do kind of deep down feel like it is actually a big problem for Christianity. And so, when I'm talking with friends and family, this gets brought up, and it, for me, it's kind of evidence that at least, we weren't taught the truth growing up. And I think that, I think it's something that needs to be reckoned with. I think it's something that people that I know who are still creationists should really understand, and really shouldn't be so confident in their belief that evolution is false, or that it's demonic or satanic, that kind of thing.
So it sounds like their belief in creationism is linked to their belief in God.
Yes, very much so.
Do you suppose you could tease that out?
Tease that out of them?
Meaning, like, you could be an expert in evolution. Do you suppose that would matter?
No. In fact, I think what's interesting to me is like, I brought up the endogenous retroviruses to my brother, and his response was very startling to me, because he responded by saying, but if evolution is true, then that would mean that would have these bad implications for, he had a very, it wasn't an accurate view of what evolution is, but it was like, then this racist thing would actually be true. And my response was like, well, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't have any thing to say about whether it's true or not. It could be that evolution is true and has bad implications. But to your point, I don't know that all the facts really matter, because I think, I don't know.
Yeah. So to me, and this is something that we all do, but when we put the implications of a belief, when we prioritize the implications of a belief, then it's prime for motivated reasoning, for working backwards to deny, to find excuses, our writer jumps through mental gymnastics to try and protect that belief, because what matters to us is the implications. I hold that believing something that isn't true sets us up for potential failure, because reality might catch up with us. That's not always the case, but the point is, for me as a critical thinker, it's important to separate the two, to understand what my motivations are, to try to recognize, am I attached to this belief? Is this something that I really want to be true or don't want to be true for some various reason? Because if that's the case, if I feel really emotionally triggered by the thought of me being wrong about something, then it means that I might be fooling myself. And so if you're talking to somebody then who might have these different beliefs, then the facts aren't going to do it. To drill down to what's behind it and to maybe help them see the difference between, to help them be okay with accepting God without all of these other things being true as well. Because I don't think you're ever going to get through by here's what evolution is and here's what's right. I know it wouldn't have worked for me, for example. So do as much as you can to try to understand their motivations.
Sure.
Great answer, Melanie. Thank you. Yeah, great question though. Great question. Yeah, for me, it's like I was a little bit more. Sounds like you were similar, Melanie, where I was a little bit more combative as a new atheist coming out of Christianity, and than I am now. And now I'm kind of like, I'll study the opposition to the point where I have the ability cognitively to like, evolution is a complicated, science, right? So, kudos to you that's that's where you are, a biologist, right? So I only had limited knowledge. And so I would only go back and forth as far as I have the ability to do that. But there's great resources out there. There are books, there are YouTube videos on things you can learn, just snippets. And there's a whole culture out there called counter apologetics. So apologetics are, Christian evidences for truths of the Bible, and there's a whole anti, or counter apologetics. And there's a lot of great answers out there. If you can't, you almost need to be an archaeologist and a biologist and a sociologist and everything to answer some of these detailed questions. Well, you can get some of those quick answers, via the internet. Obviously, screen it. But even ChatGPT can help, guide you with some books and resources. But it's a battle, and you just choose whatever you want, how much you want to learn about whatever. And I've gotten so comfortable with my own worldview at this point that I'm completely happy with other people being wrong. I'm like, I used to hang out with a group of, not necessarily young Earth creationists, but conservative Christians for 3 years as an atheist, just promoting, my side of the view. And there's times when I went through entire lectures and I just didn't say anything. I was like, what, you guys can all be, and again, this is a little bit arrogant to say that they're all wrong, but certain things I disagreed with, I didn't necessarily feel the need to speak up every single time. I just hung out with them, got to know them, dialogue with them, at my time and my choice. So it's a battle you can choose or not choose, and you can learn as much or as little as you want. And but yeah, focus on the commonalities, like you said, Melanie. That's super important. So yeah, thank you for sharing, both of you. Marian, go ahead.
I just have a comment. I think that the way to talk to people who have totally different views from us is to build trust, to be interested in what they are afraid of, what they believe in, what makes them happy, get to know them, maybe share some of, we are both wanting to have peace, or we're both find things in common, and don't try to argue with them. I have so many times come up with a perfect argument for what they're saying, but that doesn't build trust. That just makes them say, oh, we're very different. So it's finding things in common that you can share with them, and then maybe they'll be more interested in being vulnerable together, sharing things that we're afraid of. And I think you did, Melanie, talk about some of those very things. But I just wanted to share that it's very hard to do when you're talking. For me, it's, talking with Trump supporters. It's just, I just don't know where to start with them, because I feel like if they believe that that's what a president should be like, I can't even begin to share anything with them.
Yeah,
Well said,
I
Mary. We understand. Go ahead, Melanie.
Okay.
yeah, yeah. This is a really hard thing because tribalism is really powerful, and it's self-perpetuating, and I almost like I don't know how to break through. Um, I will say in your comments what I heard, if I could okay, I'm losing my ability to be articulate as the day goes on, but I'm going to do my best. If you're having a conversation with somebody, I would say there's a few questions that are important to ask. The first one I would say is, how sure are you that you're right? And actually put a spectrum on it, like give it a numerical value, 0 to 10, 0 to 100, whatever it is. You could then ask, why aren't you more sure? Not why are you so sure? Because if you do that, they're going to give you reasons for why they think they're right, in which case they're probably going to be more confident when they're done because they gave you all those reasons. If you ask them, why aren't you more sure? Then they come up with their own reasons for why they might be wrong. And that's way more powerful than us doing it. The next question would be, how would you feel if you were wrong? Because if you are, if the thought of being wrong is emotionally triggering, then that's a pretty good sign that you might be motivated reasoning, or at least have the potential to do so. One of the important lessons along those lines, one of the more important lessons with critical thinking is to separate our beliefs from our identity as much as possible. Like, we are not our beliefs. It is hard to be objective about something that I've attached myself to because I don't want to be wrong. I will go to battle to defend it. Okay, so how would you feel if you were wrong? And the other one is, how would you know? So even how would you test it? So this gets to, are we talking about a value? Are we talking about an empirical claim? And then once we know that it's not an empirical claim, that's a completely different question. If it is, then we can start to find out. But all of these questions, to me, they're not just great questions to get to the heart of critical thinking. They're great conversation questions because they model critical thinking. They model connection, humility, skepticism, curiosity. It's not me telling you why I'm right. It is, let's think through this. Let's explore this together.
You pulled that together well. You pulled that together well, Melanie. Thank you so
Am I
much.
doing really well on like 2 hours of sleep?
You did good. So let's take, we got one more hand up, Jerry, and thank you for that question, Mary. And you had some good advice too about just common ground and finding common ground with people and dialoguing with them without getting angry. And you're right, Melanie, if you get angry at something, that's a sign for yourself that why are you getting so defensive about a different, that's maybe more emotionally charged reasoning than it is, fact-based. Jeremy, go ahead.
Thanks, Rhett. And Melanie, thank you so much for being here. I know we're almost out of time, and I wanted to make a comment more than a question. I am a neurosocial psychologist, so I very much enjoyed your talk because I've been studying this from a different angle for a long time. Like you, I'm over-educated and understand how research has to be vetted over and over and over again 1,000,000,001 times in order to validate anything that we're saying, especially in the social sciences. And some things that I had put in the chat before I like the fact that you actually touched on this, is when calling a fallacy on an artificial social construct, questioning one's worldview, and then thus their identity, and causing, like fear of community rejection, isolation, and then being ostracized. And these are huge motivators to follow without questioning authority. And being wrong, like you just said, it feels like an emotional death for some people. I mean, you attack that worldview. And this is why, one of the things I engage in a lot with other organizations like Braver Angels and moderating with people is not attempting to ever make someone think they're wrong. It's more, I don't need to make you right. I don't need to convince you. I don't need to change you. All I need to do is listen to you, actively listen, accept the fact that you have a right to your view and that I have really heard you. And then at the same time, be able to say, now, are you willing to maybe hear my perspective on this? And that's such a big piece of it, especially when we talk about the biology, because like I said, I'm a neurosocial psychologist. I have studied with fMRIs the actual biological responses that go on in the brain, not just chemical, but structurally changing in the brain depending on what's going on with the amygdala and the insula, the cingulate cortex. And we're finding some fascinating things are going on from just perception alone, and how people can have different perceptions, and it doesn't mean right or wrong, but it's definitely biologically affecting their brain. And so I'm really glad that you touched on some of that, because I do think there's a preponderance of evidence that is starting to come to light as we're getting more and more research and technology.
Well, I'm glad to know that I didn't say anything that was wrong. So thank you. But also, like, I'm totally with you. The dress was a great example because people literally saw different colors. And I just think if we are perceiving the colors of this dress differently, imagine how many things throughout our days we are perceiving differently. And I'm going to you going, how could you be so wrong? Oh my God, what are you, stupid? Here are my facts. And then when you don't believe me, like, oh God, you're really stupid, or are you evil? As opposed to like the potential that we might actually be perceiving reality differently. And then also add to that, we spend all day on devices that are giving us more of what we think is true about the world. And then is it any wonder that we look up after 8 hours of this and then look at each other going, oh my God, what are you talking about? How could you be so wrong? So yes, totally with you. That was more of a comment than the question, but thank you for saying something.
Well, and what you were
like, how do we
saying
know?
is so important
Oh, good, Jeremy.
in the sense of when you see a car accident, for instance, and you wonder, why do the police ask 100 people or 20 people? Because everybody's perception is different, depending on the shadow, depending on the angle. I mean, I might see something that you go, no, that did not happen. And it's like the police are looking at all of us, like you just said, are you all a bunch of idiots and are you all stupid?
Well, and even how they ask the question could get a different response. Yes.
And how do we all know that chicken tastes the same? Try to prove that one. Chicken tastes the same for me as it does for you. Well, some people like it and some people don't, so we have no idea. And we do have Dino with the hand up. Melanie, if you're just one more question, super quick question or comment. Yeah, and then we're done. Yeah, Dino, go ahead. You've been patient.
Hello,
Since you have the
thank you.
same background as me, I'll let you ask.
Thanks. So I was wondering, religion offers some sort of usefulness to people. That's why they kind of get into religion, right? Because it serves some sort of purpose. My question is whether as a society we can perhaps give a different solution to the need that we have for religion. One that is more scientific, one that is more grounded in reality, in reason, in science, in facts, in evidence.
Great question.
Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I do not have thoughts, but about this at all. I was just wondering if I had to guess, if I were to just out of the hat, I would say education in terms of maybe going back to the Socratic method of asking questions, being skeptics, forming this skeptical sort of mindset. But I don't know how that will affect people's mentally, their mental health. I don't know how, if they're going to all be skeptics, they're going to wondering about what is this and what is that and what happens after death and so on, how their mental health might, they might perhaps humans need some sort of, I know this for a fact that this is going to happen. Perhaps humans need certainty. And if that's the case, then I guess religion will always be with us. Or shall we say, we will always have thoughts that are ungrounded, basically. So I don't have any answers other than maybe ask more questions, be more skeptical.
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I have a lot of friends and family still back in Iowa who hold these beliefs. And I've had to come to terms with this because in my militant atheist days, I went from very certain one way to very certain another way. And I was definitely in a need to try to convince people around me that I was right. I guess what I would say is it's not all, these beliefs aren't always harmful, and they do serve comfort to people. My mother still really wants to believe these things. They give her the comfort that she will be with my grandmother one day, and I find it really hard to take that from her, and I don't necessarily need to. And so to me, it comes down to when the rubber hits the road, are the beliefs causing harm, and or are they in direct conflict with what we know about the world? And there's a place where we don't know. And if somebody wants to fill that with the kind of comfort and certainty that comes with a belief in a deity, then there are other battles that I choose to fight.
Well said, Melanie. Yeah, and for me, it's like depends on what you're looking for, right? If you're looking for community to replace religion, there are secular communities out there. They're typically smaller and few and far between, but there are, with Zoom and stuff, it's not as personal, of course, but there are online discussions and groups of common like-minded people. But I don't know. I mean, it's good to have a couple of those, but I would just find your passion, follow your passion, find a meetup group, find a local club, a group that something you like to do. If you like to race cars or be hike in nature or play video games or foster animals like my wife and I do, find those things that you're passionate about, and you'll find community within those groups. And you can be religious, not religious, and it's just a great way to mix yourself into the world and not necessarily find a tribe that's only like you. It's great to find a topic or a topic of interest, and then mix and mingle. And you might find some people that are similar and some that are different, and that's just part of being human. But yeah, I've actually found as an atheist, just one other plug for, not necessarily another plug, but I've been hanging out with the Unitarian Universalist congregation here in my local hometown, and they are the most open-minded group. They don't call themselves Christian. They don't call themselves a church. They call themselves a congregation. They're at least 25% atheists. Everybody else is somewhere along the spiritual line. You can be Buddhist, you can be Hindu, you can be Muslim. It doesn't matter where you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome. And I feel welcome as an atheist. I've gotten more involved just because of their social justice outlet as opposed to any of their religious beliefs. So there is hope for community. If you really want a community like a church without some of the religiosity, Unitarian Universalist is just to put in a plug for them. So with that, I think we are done. I want to give a few more people. Meredith, I know that you often your group often partners with a local UU as well.
Yes, we
Any
do.
plug for that? Yeah.
Yeah, the Live Oak Unitarian Society often, we often partner with them. They sometimes co-host our events, live and or well, they're either just Zoom or they're hybrid nowadays
Yes.
since COVID, so that anybody can participate, join in, and listen, and be there for them, even if they're not in Santa Barbara or the area.
Very cool. Very cool. So again, one last thank you for Melanie. Thank you so much for being with us today. Everybody for joining. I know some people had to drop off. Save the chat at least once more before you go. I apologize if we didn't get to some questions. The chat got a little overwhelming for me to find questions. So hopefully you got to do the raise the hand. And Melanie, enjoy your day. Get some rest. Get some food, whatever you need. Good luck. And I want to hear about your book. And we're going to have you back after you get your book finished. So keep on the work there.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here and for supporting each other. And I am so I wish I had had communities like this when I was leaving religion. And so thank you for the work that you do. And I'm honored to be here with you. So thank you.